hi everybody in the house.
Yeah, kia ora everyone. Kia ora koutou, he mihi nui kia koutou. Pai ana kei te korero kia koutou mō tēnei kaupapa tihau mauri ora. Hi everyone, to our Pritchard from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I just welcomed everyone in my first Nations language, and he mihi nui kina mana whenua. And just acknowledging the people of everyone's different lands, First Nations. I'm just talking about our topic being shutting down the Weapons Expo, and those of you might know that in Aotearoa, we managed to shut down the Weapons Expo and have left our lands. We have had a couple of years of wonderful use of our time on other activities, and so the Weapons Expo is just one thing that we don't have to think about really. It's not over, obviously, but it's definitely about how to shut down all the other activities that are happening. And most of all, I wanted to share about what went well for us and some of the strategies that we use. I'm not sure if you can see my screen. Oh, okay. It's too hard. What we did do in Aotearoa, like everyone else, we had lots of actions. What really worked well for us, because the actions and the protesting and all the clever things we work on, it's very exhausting and it depletes energy, and sometimes it's physically taxing. So we have lots of people that get better enough, and we have, quite a few people ending actions with some kind of mental health situation, PTSD. So there's physical and psychological and emotional harm. And so what worked well is a few things. Is we really started investing a lot of time, energy and care, and how to prepare people for the actions in terms of emotional care. So we did quite a lot of writing about how to take care of yourself emotionally at the actions and after the actions, and how to not go home alone after actions and have check-ins. So that was really helpful, because every year, or every action in the year, because it's not just the weapons, there's so many more actions that we do solidarity with. It just got really exhausted and people became unwell. And so we started teaching people how to take care of themselves, how to release emotional trauma, because some of our actions are really traumatic. They're quite violent and traumatic physically and emotionally. So we did a lot of that work. And in addition to that, we started doing some really cool things, like at the end of actions, we did signature kind of endings, and we would rock on music and just party and dance at the end and celebrate that we had got to the end. And they had two benefits for us. It allowed us to release the toxins and the dirt or the pain, and release everything that we experienced in the protest section. In the blockade, we got to shake it off physically, danced around, release with everyone else, and we also got to celebrate our achievement of the day. And as a collective, rather than just walking away from action and dancing it off, we got to come together and bond and celebrate and remember how wonderful we are, and see each other and hold each other and hug, and that helped us to leave actions as well and leave well. And doing that as well, it did piss off a lot of the police and security, and it did piss them off, and they did not look at us very positively when we were celebrating all our achievements. I think the other thing that brings up is that we started talking around what success looks like in every preparation for action, we started talking about what does success look like for every person involved, because we found that at the end of actions, people would say that we'd failed because we didn't shut down a conference or expo. Even if we shut it down for 3 hours or 5 hours, or we shut it down for the whole day, you know, some people had different views on what success looked like. So once we did that, it meant that we would celebrate every success. If we had, you know, people turn up, that was successful. If we had people block out a conference for an hour, that was successful. And so building on our success meant that people would come back because they felt like we actually achieved something. And then we would write about it. We will write about all our wins. And we've got some videos that I haven't figured out how to maneuver on here, but I can link it up. And we started, different collective groups started putting out winning videos of our wins. And that's really important, to acknowledge all our wins so that we feel like we're moving somewhere, we're achieving something. And also we get to see and celebrate all those wins together. And that leads me to the current thing we're doing at the moment. Even in action, we're working on having gatherings where we get to socialize. It's not just an action. We get to socialize and hang out as human beings and remember who we are, because we've had a lot of burnout, and we want to keep our relationships going, and we want to find out who we are as human beings, not just activists. So one of the things that we've been doing over the years is we've been connecting as people and finding out more about us as people in addition to activism. So when people don't turn up, we're like, oh, whereas this person, we know they're a single parent, we know they're looking after children, or we know they've got a sick family. And so that reminds us to remain human. When we feel frustrated and not enough people turn up, we're like, rather than saying, where are you? Why are you not here? We actually know that you have sick families to look after, or that you have a mental health situation, or that you've got children. And so we are still aligned as allies with those people. So I think we've been working a lot around how to celebrate and honour and really care for each other so that we can come back. One of the main reasons we did that is that we were losing people to actions. People were not feeling cared for, not feeling valued. I think it's like in every situation. So we started doing a lot of that work, and we're still doing that. We've got together and learning to talk about and be vulnerable about ourselves. So we've set up, at the moment, Aotearoa, we've got in Palmerston North our group that meets, because of COVID and everything has added to the exhaustion. We've been trying to connect either through Zoom or different chat networks to really build each other's energy. And in Palmerston North here, we met and just had some, had a conversation and some food, and we're encouraging each other to be really vulnerable with each other. So if we have relationships and something's annoying, we're learning how to be upfront and not be afraid to talk to each other in a vulnerable space, because we might be afraid that they might not turn up to an action or they might not support us. We want to be really deep in our relationships so that we really can talk about a range of things that are happening with us individually and collectively. The other thing we have been doing that has really worked is building our solidarity in terms of allyship. So as a First Nations person, our groups, we would run solidarity camps so that our allies, those who aren't from First Nations, would learn about how to support us and how to hear our voice. And so if we were clear about what support, what action we needed, it wasn't around negotiating that, it was around allies learning to either decide if they can provide that or they can't. And if they can't, then to move out of that space and then just vacate that space for those people who were able to hear us and provide the support the way we wanted to. And then if that was happened, when that happened, it meant that we didn't have to keep convincing or persuading people that our practices, our rituals, or our traditional practices, whether they were okay with it, whether they could cope with it. We didn't have to use all our energy to convince our comrades, who are allies, to stay with us and trust us. So that really meant that we didn't exhaust ourselves, and we didn't have to constantly worry about whether they were going to stay with us or leave. So we did quite a lot of allyship training in that area. As a First Nations group, what we did is we incorporated that into our weapons expos. So if we had any action, and that's everywhere, that's in climate change, that's in local issues, we would incorporate a First Nations event, and that would be a whole day. And so for when we did the weapons expo, we went to a beach, we had food, we gathered, we had ceremonial practices. Only First Nations people were involved, and our allies that weren't First Nations came to support and protect us by looking out and just watching who was coming around. We've had time speaking to our creators in our language, singing, having blessings, and also sharing food with all our comrades. And that also is to help with the spiritual care. So in the actions that we do now as First Nations, we're really quite obvious, and we come in our attire, our First Nations clothing. We encourage everyone to wear whatever attire that represents their grouping. And yeah, we want everyone to be obvious. We want it to be really obvious who we are. And so and that allows us to renew our energy, really center and ground ourselves with Mother Earth and Sky Father, which is part of our rituals. And it means that we can do actions in a way that meets our spiritual comfort and allows us to be intact as a person, so we don't have to deconstruct ourselves to be in many different minds and then try and put ourselves together and repair ourselves as the action finishes. So those are some First Nations and strategies and tips for when we collectively coming together. I think the last thing is that in Aotearoa, it probably happens everywhere, but we create solidarity against different purposes, different kaupapa. So the climate groups, anti-fascist groups, anti-militant groups, we all come together and support each other if we're able to, because we just need the numbers. And we also, just need to be really clear with each other when we're available. One thing that I want to share is what didn't work. Some good things what didn't work is we did some action where branding doesn't work for us. So when we're working with not-for-profit organisations that have stakeholders and they want to brand everything, and sometimes that takes the focus away from the purpose of the action. So sometimes in actions we don't have branding. We discourage people from branding their organizations because we get in this branding war, and then it just gets complicated. What doesn't work is guilting people for not turning up. So we stop doing that. We stop making people feel guilty because they don't turn up when they actually got something important in their lives to do. We also stop. We really celebrate people in their contributions, whether it's an hour a week or month. We prefer that at least we know what they really truly can contribute, rather than the desire to give time and the energy when they really can't, and then they don't turn up. So we discourage guilting people, and also we work really hard to learn the language of the community. So we don't speak too technically, we don't have too many jargons and acronyms that actually excludes people from entering. And we also over the years have learned to discourage groups from taking ownership of causes. And we've experienced sometimes when some groups and not-for-profit groups have claimed causes, and then we have in-house fighting. We just look at what spaces can we take, what separate days can you take it on. If we don't all agree on completely how our philosophical basis is, then how do we ensure that everyone gets to do the action against, like, the weapons Expos? How can everyone contribute? And if we all don't get along, which in some of those actions not all groups did, we would find space for them and times in the day where they can do their actions, and then we all contribute to stopping the weapons expo. So that's my bit.
Thanks.
Hopefully, yeah. Thank you.
So I'll go next, and then Zelda, if Zelda's happy to go next, and then I can see that there's quite a few people in the queue to hop into the conversation. So we're looking forward to hearing from you. And thank you, Tara. Always enjoy hearing about kind of what you're doing in New Zealand and what the tactics of First Nations people. I think this is a perspective we really don't get to hear often enough, and you know, especially myself based in the UK, for example. So thank you. So hi folks, I'm Siana Bangura, and I'm from Campaign Against Arms Trades, otherwise warmly known as CAT. As I said, based in the UK, and we are what it says on the tin. We are an organisation campaigning against the international arms trades. And I guess just to follow on from really what Teo has talked about, I wanted to also just share a little bit about what we've kind of been doing, and very briefly kind of I suppose the overview of the sort of arms expos landscape in the UK, and just some things that we've done and are doing and kind of have learnt. And we're still very much in the process of learning. The pandemic has very much changed how we work, and I'm sure that's the case for many others as well. So yes. So I wanted really just to note that in the UK, there are, you know, a number of kind of arms expos taking place, but there are three big ones, I suppose, that are government-backed, supported and facilitated. And they are security and policing, which happens every March. So that's actually just taken place this year, but it took place online rather than in person because of the pandemic. There's Farnborough, which happens every other July. And there is the big one coming up, DSCI, which happens every other September, with this year being a September that it will be taking place in London at the Excel Centre in East London. And as well as those big government-backed, supported and facilitated arms fairs, we also have a few more small and localised ones, such as 3DSC in Malvern, an area in the UK, DPRTE, which takes place in June. It's been kind of back and forth, but this June it seems to have been cancelled / moved, I believe, to October, and I'm again probably because of the pandemic. And other arms fairs such as the Liverpool Arms Fair, which actually our local activists were able to chase out of town. So we have a few kind of successes, as well as kind of the ongoing ones that are still very much a challenge for us. Wanted to just make a note about Farnborough, especially. The Farnborough area is actually a hotbed, it feels, for arms fairs and other arms trade related events and exhibitions. We've got a small local group there who are on the ground currently trying to build resistance, but it's incredibly, I'm sure this is something that maybe some folks here can relate to and maybe have some stories about, but it's incredibly difficult in certain areas when actually the local community is deeply connected to militarism. And for example, many jobs are connected to the industry. It means actually that the kind of local support you might need is a bit more difficult to find, so to speak. And actually, exhibitions like Farnborough, they actually have a lot of crossover with, for example, ADEX in South Korea, where they have this kind of youth and family-friendly element. I think they've stopped the Farnborough Air Show, but the idea is to kind of paint militarism as this thing that, you know, folks should kind of uphold and you know, see, it should be very much kind of like celebrated, and you know, all the kind of pride that you're sort of taught that comes with it all. I wanted just to run through briefly some of our tactics. So our big thing really is that we actually have a network of community groups and local organisers and campaign groups, local CAT groups across the country who really organise together to resist arms fairs. I also just wanted to, sorry, before I continue, just noting that I think some of you are having, or you're finding it difficult to hear us. So I'm just really hoping that you were able to hear Teo, and I hope you're able to hear me. But just to note that I've seen that in the chat box that there are some audio issues, but hopefully that is not for everybody. So yeah, we have these local groups are really a big sort of main source, a main tactic, shall we say, a main resource, a main plus point that we have our organisation based across the UK, often organising throughout the year, depending on capacity, but mainly, although things are kind of changing, but the sort of big every other year project has always been resistance against DSEI, and that has usually come in the form of a week of action. So it'd be a week of action the week before the expo itself. The aim would have been to, I suppose, stop it going ahead or causing enough disruption. Great, thanks, Chris, that you can hear me. The aim would have been to cause enough disruption so that the actual fair doesn't then go ahead the following week. And in terms of the form that that week has taken, for the last 10 years, folks have got together. It's evolved from a day of action to a week. There'd be themed days, so you'd have everything from Stop Arming Saudi, a big campaign, an ongoing campaign, that campaign against arms trade, or Stop Arming Israel, to Borders Day, to Climate Justice Day, to Conference at the Gate. And Conference at the Gate would be something that it would be a day to kind of really think about universities and our education systems and how they are interlinked and connected to the arms trade, and academics and students would come out and do things and actually sort of try to blockade, for want of a better term, really by holding a conference at the gates where weapons would go in. We've also have a very big religious day often called No Faith in War. So in 2019, we had a big number of Quakers and other religious groups kind of, protesting and again, doing their best to disrupt the incoming equipment, shall we say. So although this year, again, in response to the pandemic, there's, again, the kind of that particular tactic is evolving, and our local groups are kind of working on maybe more of a day of action in the week of the Arms Expo, it says, and we look forward to seeing what that looks like as we kind of change tactics and move the day and kind of move the form of things. Other things, yeah, like with the week of action as well, and in other ways, we collaborate with partner organisations like Palestine Solidarity Campaign in the UK, War on Want, CND, which is the campaign for nuclear disarmament, and basically anyone whose work intersects with our sort of aims. The other kind of things that we do, particularly in my area of work as the events and training coordinator, we are focusing on capacity building our activists, and particularly vital as we are in this moment and ongoing world really of digital organising. I know that a lot of our local groups have had to adapt to that and think of ways to still be effective and innovative during a time of distance. And so we've really changed a lot of kind of our trainings and stuff to really focus on how do you still disrupt whilst being online? How do you organise securely? How do you make sure that you're able to be digitally adept, I suppose? And so it's really been a kind of trial, error, refine and test approach. One of the things that's come out of that approach is a new workshop that we've designed called Disrupting Online Arms Fairs, which is going to be delivered by my colleague, Kirsten Bays, who is our local outreach coordinator. One of the other things that we've had to really focus on is political education, and making knowledge of how the arms trade works more accessible and readily available to the general public through things such as our reading group series, which actually a few people involved with World Beyond War have been involved with somehow or attending. We've also had a number of events and workshops and resources developed. We've got our podcast, People Not War. And we also just recently in March had our digital edition of our It Starts Here conference. And the idea again is to, whilst we're not able to get on the streets like we usually would, and actually that's been such a big focus for Campaign Against Arms Trade and the way we organised in the past, getting on the streets. Being able now to actually take a step back and think about education has been incredibly important for us. Thank you, Rachel, for the reminder of time. I've almost finished. We also, one big thing that is kind of across our work is naming and showing the many ways that the arms trade is connected to other intersecting issues, such as racism and colonialism, capitalism, environmental justice, militarized borders, militarized policing, security, and so on and so forth. Rather than it being a distraction, it's important to show that, you know, this area of work is not a silo issue. There are no single issue struggles, as Audre Lorde reminds us. And so a lot of our work has been focused on making sure that we underpin the arms trade with other issues to ensure that, you know, we are speaking to a wider audience. Unfortunately, in the UK, in my experience anyway, our movement is pretty kind of more white, more middle class, kind of more older activists involved, and we do need to diversify our demographics. We need affected communities kind of leading in our work. We need them represented. We need younger people as well who are, as we know, very politically activated, as we've seen recently. We want them to feel like this is a movement that they have a stake in, and actually, you know, make it very clear why ending the global arms trade is something that should concern all of us. And yeah, just kind of off that point too, just showing meaningful solidarity has been really important. So for example, we've last year and this year actually did work around Black Lives Matter, and actually really supporting by doing a lot of research into how, you know, the policing has become militarized. And that's actually an area of work that I do in and outside of CAT. So we actually ended up being able to uncover some information about the equipment that was used against BLM protesters actually having links to the UK. If you remember the NSARS movement in Nigeria as well, we were able to do some research to find information again about how the UK, for example, was responsible for training that particular unit. So it seems that actually a lot of different things, a lot of different movements, somehow the UK is involved. And so it's even more important in our work to kind of centre the role of the UK government, basically, in perpetuating and exporting violence across the world. And that's been a really key focus in some of our tactics, making sure that that is at the forefront of the work that we do as well. So yeah, and as I said, we're really now just focusing on refining our tactics, making sure they feel fresh, effective and relevant, and that they respond to the demand of the times, particularly the changing demands of the times, as we continue to navigate a very an ever-changing digital world. So I will leave it there and invite Zelda to tell us a little bit about what's going on with her and her comrades. I think you're muted.
I was. Thanks, Siana. Thanks, Tao. I'm speaking Jagger and Turrbal country, which is in Queensland, Australia. It's 3 a.m. here, and we've just had a week-long festival of resistance to disrupt a major weapons expo here called Land Forces. So pretty exhausted. So I guess the best thing that we did at the start of this organising, we started organising about 6 months ago, was we held a session with Peace Action in Aotearoa to really hear from them what sorts of strategies and tactics had worked for them. And that was, you know, really inspiring, and we took a lot away from that. So the peace movement here has been pretty quiet for a long time. There hasn't been any significant resistance to weapons fairs for about 20 years. So we were really kind of starting fresh. And it was really important to get that that inspiration and those ideas from Te Ao and Val and others from Peace Action in Aotearoa. And I hear what you have just touched on, Siana, and that sounds really similar as well to the approach that we took. So one of the main things we took away from that was that approach needed to be intersectional. So in our messaging and our sort of build towards the campaign, we identified 7 ways in which weapons impact us. So 7 kind of issues areas, I guess. So one was First Nations dispossession, so weapons driving the dispossession of First Nations peoples around the world, and forced extractivism. Another was climate breakdown and weapons driving climate breakdown. A third issue was the money problem of public money into weapons companies and the sort of the really disproportionate amount of global spending on militarism. Another one was that weapons create famine and refugees. Another area we looked at is militarism and feminist struggle and war as an expression of kind of peak toxic masculinity. Another area we considered was the militarism of police and how in the end weapons point at us, that they're taking our money and in the end those weapons are pointing at us. And I can't think of the seventh area right now, but there was a seventh. It'll come to me. The other way in which we really formulated the campaign was that we didn't think we could shut down the Expo because it's been a long time since there's been any active resistance to weapons fairs in Australia, and the peace movement has really been on hiatus. We felt like this is us trying to kind of kickstart that campaign again, and we don't have a body of peace activists that we know will come to this. So we're not going to aim to shut it down. We're going to aim to disrupt it. So we called the campaign Disrupt Land Forces, and we said that's our aim. That's our campaign goal, is that we're going to disrupt it because we know we can achieve that. And, you know, relating to what you said, Tao, we wanted to give people a campaign they could win. We felt like we don't think we can shut it down, but we feel like we know we can disrupt it. And our second aim for the campaign was that we would start to really create some solidarity around within anti-militarism, bringing together all of those different community demographics, I suppose, that we would try to create a really intersectional engagement in the anti-militarism space. And in that second aim in particular, I feel like we really, really exceeded our goal. So we this group of participants, we had a lot of refugee and First Nations get involved. A lot of young people get involved, and yeah, we really heard your group, Tao, saying it's up to us to show how militarism is relevant. Like, don't expect the climate activists to go, oh yeah, war is a climate issue, but actually be able to articulate why war is a climate issue and hold workshops and trainings around that and so on. And this strategy really, really worked for us. So we had, you know, I think because of that frequent messaging around climate breakdown and ecocide, climate activists felt connected and like, yeah, this is our campaign and this is a space for us to be active in, because of our messaging around First Nations dispossession. And that was very foregrounded for us, being in Australia, which is a colony where there is still a lot of police brutality towards Indigenous people. And we also have a strong connection with West Papua. So that's another campaign that we run, an ongoing campaign that we run, Make West Papua Safe. Identified that the West Papuan issue in particular was one that was very mobilising for Australians, and the refugee issue is one that's mobilising for Australians. So those are two issues where Australians are already quite active and engaged. So a lot of West Papuans participated in the campaign, and First Nations folks from all over were also active in the campaign. And then bringing in the feminist movement, like it gave particularly younger women a feel that they had a stake in this campaign. And there was, we talked about smashing patriarchy because war is peak toxic masculinity. And yeah, that really worked for us, that approach. So in terms of our campaign goals and bringing in an intersectional movement, we really, really smashed that one. In terms of disrupting, we certainly disrupted it. And in fact, we started the disruption days before the opened. We managed to get on top of a tank that they were pulling in. We used an app called Telegram to alert people. Updates channel we used was Telegram, and we managed to get a couple of hundred people onto our Telegram chat. So as soon as something happened, it was like, okay, there's a blockade on at the convention centre now, get down if you can. And within minutes, we would have 50 people, 60 people down there around the tanks. So that really worked for us, that channel. I might show you a few images. Oh, I'll just touch on another thing that worked well for us is our kind of our policy, if you like. So we kept our participation agreement very simple, and we said that we ask people to agree to. So one is no harm to other living beings. So rather than using the term non-violent, that carries a bit of ideological baggage, and that not everybody, like some of us are really well versed in what non-violence means, and for others they don't understand it. And then we find that in campaigns, people often get very bogged down in talking about what is and what isn't violent, and what is and what isn't a right way to protest. And we also learned this from your people, Te Ao, that and Siana, that's not a useful activity of a blockade. We want people to be really free to express themselves in the way that they want to, the way we would express ourselves, or it's not the same kind of ideological underpinning that we have. So we only had that very simple zero harm to other living beings as a principle, and the other one was to be respectful with each other. And then we had a much more nuanced, safer spaces to refer to and look up. Those are our two core principles that we asked people to agree to. And with the second of those, we asked people to practice respect very deeply. And I coined a term I'm calling radical respect, which that that people will express themselves in protest in ways that you don't relate to. Like somebody might pray to Allah, and that might be completely something you don't identify with. Or somebody else might swear at the police, and that also might be something you really don't identify with. But we ask that you let that be okay with you, that you don't have to love it and you don't have to identify with it, but you let it, and really extend radical respect and understand that we're all coming from the same place of, love of the people of the planet and her peoples, and you respect that humanity in each other. And that seemed to really work for us. We had that full range of different types of expression, and people, I didn't hear any whole week. I didn't hear any people disrespecting each other's activism or having a go at the way that other people are active, even though there was, really quite different ways that people express themselves. So I'm going to show you a few pictures. How much time do I have? I have 5 minutes or something left.
4 minutes. Probably like couple, yeah.
Something like that. Well, the moderator can just tell me when it's time to jump off. Can you see my window? I don't think you can. You can? Ah, there we go.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, so this is some of our people. Sorry, everyone, I'm on someone else's laptop, and it's a Mac, and I'm not used to driving Macs. Okay, so this was a series of photos of some of our, which I felt like I wanted to just show how diverse we were. So I kept, this is down at the barricade at the front of the convention center. So one of the sort of messaging terms I kept, all ages, all cultures, all genders, united as fuck. Excuse the swear. Can I see that? Yeah, I think people can see. That's me with one of our very young team. This poor young fellow got wounded, and here he's being tended by someone he's never met who's 3 times his age. That was kind of beautiful. That's one of our elders. And some of the art that we put on display. I'll show them. This was our tea guy. He brought a whole tea trolley down and made cups of tea and bickies for everyone. And this was one of our more disruptive actions where we managed to open a door on the inside of the convention center, and 20 of us got inside and got on top of a Rheinmetall tank and locked on and made a huge amount of noise. And yeah, and this action has had now 1 million views of the live stream. So it's been very widely shared and inspiring to people. These are our climate angels. So in Australia, we have a troop called the Climate Angels who are there to foretell of the disaster that humanity faces if we don't address climate breakdown. And the climate angels are designed to be disruptive as well. So they're an excellent block because they're so wide, and sometimes they lock onto things also. There we are on top of the tank again. We had solidarity actions coming in from other places, including one in Wellington. This one here is in Cairns, in the far north of Australia. Our promotional material, Smash Patriarchy Day on the Thursday. And yeah, that's our Dinner of Death parade that we did during the and this was pretty fabulous. So Extinction Rebellion people organised this. Got the Red Rebels coming in, and we had a coffin, and we had a marching band, and we used it to disrupt a conference drinks session. And again, made a lot of noise, but very festive noise. So I might stop sharing now and come back to you because it must be nearly up. My time must nearly be up. But yeah, I guess one other, oh, you've done Dining with Death. Yeah, so it's a very similar idea. And we used a lot of blood. We used a lot of fake blood in our actions. And we actually had a lube supplier, someone who manufactures commercial quantities of lubricant, give us 100 kilograms of lube. So that got coloured red and that got spread around quite a lot. Yeah, peace angels, Chris Wilson, absolutely. I mean, the climate angels are already a symbol of peace, so we felt like that message was already in there. So I guess one other thing we did that was successful was we called our resistance a festival of resistance, and we encouraged a lot of creative activities. So we ran workshops in theatre interventions that were disruptive, and we did a lot of dance and movement and musical work, and really encouraged people to use their imaginations and be bold and try new tactics. And that actually gathered momentum as we went along. At first, but we ran over a week of disruption, and people just got more and more creative as time went on, until things were happening that the key organizers had no idea were going to happen, and someone would pop up with this glorious creative action. So it really unfolded beautifully, like we'd created a really ample space for protest, and that we'd invited people to fill it, and they really did. So we're really thrilled with how it all went, and thank you to Peace Action Aotearoa and to Kat for all the inspiration you provided us with in the lead up. Oh, I see that there's only there's people in the queue for questions and only a few minutes left, so part of the campaign that I've personally found really thrilling was that we started to build some active solidarity links with people in Palestine and Colombia and West Papua. So we already had links in West Papua, but we've started now to build them with Palestine and Colombia, and in particular, and that was really exciting for us to feel like, yeah, we're a long way away in Australia and in Aotearoa. Thank you, and let's turn over to the questions, Alex.
Liz, everyone's in bed. That's what you all are. Hi, Liz.
I've got a question in the chat. We deliberately said be respectful with each other rather than be respectful to other people, because no, we didn't extend that respect to our opponents. We felt like we are there to disrespect them. We are there, they should be ashamed, and we don't want anyone to feel constrained about that.
That. Absolutely love that. We had one more. We had two people in the queue. One was Liz, but they seem to have disappeared. Is there anybody who has any questions for us? You can either put them in the chat, or if you want to appear, then Alex, our wonderful volunteer, will help you get on. Oh, I think Liz has returned.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Great to see you, and Zelda, fantastic, well done. How did you share the story with like the climate activist, etc.? Around sharing the story of militarism with the climate activists to get them to participate.
Well, it was just in our messaging constantly in the 6 months in the lead up that militarism, weapons drive climate breakdown, that, you know, the US military is the largest carbon emitter in the world. We talked about deforestation and linked it to First Nations dispossession, because that's in Australia, we talk about the frontier wars, the wars of colonization and dispossession, but those wars are not over. Those wars are continuing, and that front line of colonization is still being pushed in places like Papua and everywhere that you find Indigenous peoples defending. We always connected that in with issues of possession and of so you have First Nations peoples defending their country and their forests and rivers, and then you have military enforcing the extraction that's going on, on behalf of the big companies. So the deforestation issue is also a militarism issue, is also a dispossession issue, is a racism issue. So we constantly messaged in that intersectional way. But we also have strong relationships in the climate movement. So especially myself and Kate, who's our kind of web person, both are very, have a strong background in the climate movement. So those relationships were brought into play as well. How long did it take to get ready for the action? From Jean Cushman. 6 months. And that was not really enough time. We had a low bar this time. We're going to disrupt. And we didn't even say how much we were going to disrupt it. We just said we were going to disrupt it. So we had a campaign win. And next time we can set the bar hopefully a little bit higher. And then there's a question from Brent. Along with people blocking entryways, can you speak to the use of physical objects like hay bales, earth, art to block roadways and entrances? That's not something we managed to do. We only used human bodies. But Siana, something you've done?
Yeah, and various actions, not just the weapons actions in Aotearoa. Sometimes I think Extinction Rebellion just did it recently, pre-COVID. They painted a car and put it in the middle of the road. And so sometimes with actions, parked cars are easier to lose than human bodies if we do an action. So using physical things means you don't need to lose people, or you can move them around. So we have had plant boxes. So putting plant boxes in on the road is a way to block traffic or wandering. And it's also a nice way to do some gardening. So we some of our groups have tried to double up. So plant boxes, people get frustrated, but quite a lot of people don't want to just do plants. So simple things like that are actually really effective. You don't have to have huge resources or get huge things, but we have put cars in the way. Painted cars, allow people to come and paint cars. Hammer cars. There's a few that we've used. I just saw. Did you want to add to that, Siana, or I just saw another question about water for me?
Yeah, you can definitely answer the water question. It's just a quick one. Yeah, we've had an instance of, I think it was actually XR coming on a climate day. So it's kind of separate to us, but they, I think it was a boat. So there was a boat used, quite interestingly. And I'm not sure, but I think there may well be a video or something, but I'm not sure. But I think less so on the kind of objects as kind of physical blockades, but just thinking briefly, I didn't mention creative resistance, but I wanted I put it in the chat, but we also have worked in partnership with a organization, a kind of initiative called Art the Arms Fair, which has also been like really amazing and important. And it's a 2-week exhibition. It's going to be online this year, but usually it'd be the week before the Arms Fair and the week during the DSEI Arms Fair. And it would be in a different location. So it wouldn't be in the kind of Excel Centre area. So it might be in South London, for example, but it was just another useful thing to mention, how you can get just the ordinary person who's not in the activist circles, and that's important, right? The general public, maybe people who don't know anything about the arms trade, but they are interested in art, or they're just in the area and they happen to see this free thing going on and it's really interesting. And then you go in and you see artwork by Banksy, or you see artwork by some big named artists or smaller named artists, whatever. And then you know, along the way, they end up telling you, by the way, there is this big week of action taking place at the Excel Centre if you've got time, or if you're interested to find out more about the SCI Arms Fair. So those kind of ways of bringing people in through art and kind of other sort of initiatives we found to be quite important, basically, especially if you remember what I said about trying to make sure people who maybe aren't the kind of usual suspects, so to speak, are involved, because this shouldn't actually just be a kind of like activist club, you know, it should be an issue that people can get involved in quite widely, I suppose. So I wanted just to mention Art of the Arms Fair and kind of other similar initiatives, you know, other ways of kind of getting different audiences to learn a bit more about the arms trade. But yeah, Teo, maybe you want to answer that question that was specifically for you.
Yes, just a question from Jane saying that Alexander, I think you heard me say that water is a cause for war. So in Aotearoa, when we had the Weapons Expo, the defence system used the water to run a training program, the Navy. And the reason we addressed the war issue is because they named it after one of our gods, our First Nations gods called Tangaroa. And so that was insulting and just not okay. So our action was to reclaim the name of our god back in an action. So we went to the ocean and we did a ceremonial action, and just to make that really known that military just go around taking Indigenous names and naming their groups or naming their training operations after that. And so that is really a violation to Indigenous peoples, First Nations. So we wanted to make sure we captured that and highlighted that. And of course, on that day, we had a helicopter fly over us, and we had a truck full of police come to where we were, just peacefully saying prayers, doing ceremonial actions, and also having First Nations peoples or Indigenous peoples around, and threatened a very high, well-off environment that we were at. So they got scared that brown people in their native clothing were walking around.
Hi all. Unfortunately, I think we're at the end of the time for this session. And I think this will be the time when you can go over to the networking booths or the expo, or you can visit the different booths, or you can try out the networking if you haven't yet. You sort of a roulette system that you're matched with someone you can connect with, get to know different people who are here. But thank you all so much for being here, and thanks to the panelists, facilitators. Really appreciate your stories.
Thank you for having us. Thank you so much for who came. And we seem to
thanks, Alex.
Navigate the new platform. Thank you so much, Alex, for all your help.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for your time.
Bye, Zelda.
Bye. Sorry I couldn't get to all the questions.
Take care, everybody. Bye, Liz. Lovely to see you again.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Siana. Bye,
Bye.